Hi, I'm Faye, and in this video I wanted to share with you how you can learn how to draw fast by studying smart. Not to the point where you're a master, because that does take time, but to the point where you're finally happy with your drawings rather than frustrated. I think art is a very complicated skill to learn because it's very easy to think that it's mostly just instinctive. We know we have to study the fundamentals and everyone tells you to practice a lot, and then by doing so you somehow are supposed to just get it. So we start practicing without any aim, and we grow frustrated when we don't see the results that we want or when they take too long. I thought that watching different videos with tips on how to draw was studying. I was reading books at random and thinking that was enough. I would maybe try to implement what I was learning, but then I would quickly forget about it later. And I think very few people can just get it. And even if so, that would take a really long time. I think most of us need a bit more structure, need to study smart. I like to call it active learning, to break away from this notion that learning to draw is mostly just passive. I really dislike this passive approach because it was the source of all of my frustrations. After 2 years drawing almost every single day, I went from being able to draw a girl from front view to a girl from side view or 3/4 view. You might look at it and think there was a good-ish improvement, but in actuality, I barely learned anything. I could barely draw hair, I couldn't draw expressions, and with some luck and trying my best to follow a reference, maybe I could draw a hand. And I had zero consistency, less than a quarter of my drawings looked decent, and so I felt like an imposter because could I really draw, or did I just get lucky sometimes? Learning how to draw shouldn't be this difficult. We can make it so much more complicated than it needs to be because it's so abstract and confusing. I was just walking in circles for 2 whole years. Enough was enough. For 6 months, I decided to give in my best effort to learning how to draw properly and smartly. I dedicated 2 months of figure drawing. I really had no idea what I was doing at around the end of May, and by the end of August, I was much happier with my drawings. I took a month gap in July. I took another 2 months for portrait drawing. I also learned how to draw clothes, animals, objects, and a bit of perspective too. And after the 6 months, I could even sketch scenes from imagination and design characters too. I finally felt more confident and happier with my art because I was being able to draw the things that I wanted. Now, I'm nowhere close to becoming a master, but I'm telling you this to show you that learning how to draw in a way that is good enough for you, in a way that will make you happy, can take forever if you don't know what you're doing, but it doesn't have to. So passive learning is waiting for your brain to understand something by repetition, so by seeing something over and over again. On the other hand, active learning is finding the best exercises and practicing in a way that will help you understand the concepts that you're trying to learn. Think about, how do you study for a test in school? Do you listen to a recording of your teacher's lecture over and over again until you somehow eventually just remember the information? Or do you take notes, make flashcards, summaries, take mock tests, and etc.? You are going to have to draw hundreds of heads and 250 boxes, but you have to do it in a smart way by being intentional and deliberate. So the first thing to do is to make a plan. Decide exactly what you want to learn and for how long you're going to study it. So for example, if you want to study the figure, is it the gesture, is it the form, is it the anatomy? Break down the fundamental you're trying to learn into different steps that each can be their own goal. And if you're drawing for about 30 minutes to 1 hour every day, I would say that a good time frame is a month or 2 for each fundamental. But don't worry if that's not enough, because number 2 step is to study in cycles. This is really important. Learning how to draw is not something linear. The following steps always help with the previous steps too. So it's better to study in cycles that each increase in difficulty rather than getting stuck in one step for a really long time. I saw an artist that was studying gesture for 1 whole year without ever moving forward to drawing the form or the anatomy, probably because he felt like he wasn't good enough at it yet. But the thing is, form will help with your gesture, anatomy will help with form and gesture, so they always help each other retroactively too. So you can study everything, but the first time you make it easier by removing some of the complexity or the detail, and the next cycle you add more. You can see here, the first time I went through a cycle of studying the figure, I was doing very basic shading and wasn't doing complex things yet. But in the second cycle, I was able to add a lot more detail into my drawings. I think this is one of the key steps to learning how to draw faster in a smart way. The third thing is to focus on learning, not on the result. This is something that I think most of us are guilty of. For example, after the 6 months, I thought, okay, now I need to start making pretty drawings, to share around and maybe sell or something like that. So I started getting obsessed with how my final drawings looked like, and I was no longer happy with my drawings. I was again frustrated, and I felt like my art was regressing, so the imposter syndrome came all over again. But once I realized my problem, that I was no longer focused on studying, on learning and improving, I was just fixed on pretty drawings, I went back to this mindset of studying and improving, and eventually I did get to do pretty drawings, but I was much happier because I was enjoying the journey. Remember that pretty drawings don't prove your worth as an artist. Focus on learning a bit each day, and you will be able to draw what you want in a pretty way anyways, but you'll be much happier about it. It is a habit that is hard to break, but is so much worth for your mental health. And the fourth thing is to analyze your drawings. Also another very important skill. Try to find why your drawing isn't working and what you need to focus on next. This is a skill that you build, so at first just try to find what parts of the drawing you're happy with and which parts you're not. As you become more knowledgeable in the fundamental you're studying, you will be able to be more precise and specific with your notes. So for example, are the eyes too far apart, or is one leg longer than the other? Make it a habit of writing something down on every drawing, because it really helps you identify your shortcomings and immediately learn from your mistakes. So aside from these steps, I felt like I needed a little bit more structure to guide me through learning the fundamentals. And I used to be a teacher, so when I was thinking about how do people learn things, I immediately thought of the classroom. So let's look again at how you learn in school. First, you go to class and listen to what your teacher is saying. So that's a learn step. Next, you write down what your teacher is saying into your notes. You're copying the information. So that's copy. Third is where you make your flashcards, cheat sheets, summaries, take mock tests. So those are iterations. You're getting the same information, but studying it in different ways. And fourth, you go to the test and you try to recall everything that you learned. So that is drawing from imagination. So learn, copy, iteration, and imagination are the 4 steps of this step-by-step guide that I use, and it really helped me learn how to draw all of the fundamentals. This is what I always use. And just before we get started, I want to remind you that you should work in cycles. So you can do all of these steps in one day. 30 minutes for each one at a time is more than enough. Or you can do 2 in one day, 2 in the next day. But just remember that it's always a cycle. You go through them multiple times rather than linearly. So learn is a very straightforward step. You study whatever it is that you want, but there are a few key things to do in this step. The first is to find a variety of resources. So not only different people will explain things in different ways that will resonate with you or not, they will also naturally focus on different points that they find more important. So getting information from a variety of people will ensure that you have the most complete information. And also different formats help in different ways. Some things will click better for you while listening and seeing the visuals, and some things might click better if you're reading it. And the next thing about this step is to read multiple times. One time is definitely not enough to understand all of the information. Think about the difference when you're reading a book when you're a child versus an adult. As you grow and become more experienced in life, you take away more things from that same book. And the same thing applies here as well. So as you become more experienced in the skill or fundamental that you're trying to learn, you will understand more from the resources that you have. So make sure you continue reading or watching these resources as you're learning the fundamental. So copy is another simple step. You copy the exercises or demonstrations that you see in the resources that you just used. Then you can move on to doing master studies. So you're copying other artists that you think do the fundamental you're trying to learn well. The big advantage of copying is that other artists have already interpreted or translated reality into art form. And that is a very difficult skill. So when you already have the example on how to do it, it also makes it easier for you to later do it on your own. To take the most out of the step, you can also write down notes on what you have learned about how that artist draws that certain topic. So iteration is doing the same thing, so repeating it, but with variations. I first learned about this concept from Saikra. You can watch his video, I'll link in the description, about iterative drawing. But this is where your just practice advice falls in, but of course we're going to do it in a smarter way. Remember how I said that in each cycle you increase difficulty? Here I have 3 different levels that each increase in difficulty. When you're new to a fundamental, you learn so much more if you try to draw the same thing multiple times. So when you're a very beginner, your drawings will have lots of mistakes. So instead of doing multiple drawings all filled with mistakes, it's better to just draw once, Try to analyze your drawing, identify the problems, and drawing that same thing again, now trying to fix the problems. So you're learning from your mistakes, which is much more effective. I would start with 4 iterations and slowly bring the number down to 1 when I felt like I understood the fundamental better. In level 2, as you understand what you're studying better, you can start applying changes to the drawings. So, for example, in gesture, I would try to do iterations with exaggeration, trying to exaggerate the pose to see how far I could go. For value, I would try to apply different intensities, or for composition, you can move things around, all to see what works best. And for level 3, as you get more advanced, you can try rotating the object that you're studying. This doesn't work for value, but it works for anything that is 3D. So you can try rotating poses, drawing from a different angle, rotating portrait, trying to maintain the features of the face. This is by far the most difficult level, and you won't be able to do it perfectly at first, and that's okay. Remember that the focus is to learn, not to make drawings that look perfect. Doing this will really force you to understand what it is that you're studying. There's also a level 0 that I use sometimes when I'm tired or I just don't want to use my brain too much. Level 0 is to just group similar things together. So for example, if you're drawing the figure, group standing poses, then draw kneeling poses, then sitting. For landscape, you can draw things that just have rivers and then just mountains or forests. Grouping the fundamentals into categories will keep things clearer in your mind, and you'll be able to assimilate information better and faster if you see it frequently with just minor variations. And the final step is imagination. This is something that we think we need to wait until you learn something to then be able to draw from imagination, but that's not the case at all. Just like everything else, drawing from imagination is something that you have to actively practice. Doing it from the beginning will help you learn better from reference, and even if you are a beginner, you can still do it in small steps. So level 1 is just trying to recall something that you just drew from reference. If that's too hard, you can take a few peeks here and there, but try to work towards not looking. This will start to force your brain to really observe what it is that you're trying to study. And observation is a really important skill for drawing from imagination. Just don't expect your recall or imagination drawings to look just as good as your drawings from reference. They will be worse, but again, it's all an exercise, and you will improve over time. Level 2 is to combine references together into a new reference. So you can draw 2 or 3 drawings from reference, and without looking at them, you can try to come up with something new that combines elements from both reference. So for example, if you're drawing clothes, you can combine the color from one reference, the sleeves from another, and you can invent a little bit too. If you're drawing portrait, you can do the jaw from one, the hair from another. For poses, you can do the legs from one pose and try to combine it with the torso or arms of another pose. This step can be really fun, and it's the one I did the most because I think it's the best to actively work on building your visual library. And finally, in level 3, you can try drawing completely from imagination without a fresh reference in mind. Even if you can't draw everything yet, that's okay. I would draw poses missing their feet or hands, portraits missing hair, but it's important to do it because trying to draw something from imagination will really expose the gaps in your knowledge and immediately tell you what you need to focus on. This is the hardest step, but don't wait too long to do it. Don't be afraid to step out of your comfort zone because you can learn so much if you do so. You might still be unsure on how to apply all of this to learn the different fundamentals. So I'll be making videos on each fundamental, sharing the best resources and exercises that I found, and show how to study them using active learning. The first 2 videos are already out and they are on figure drawing gesture. You can find them here and in the description, but more on portrait, value, colors, it's all coming as well. Anyways, if you thought this video was helpful, please consider sharing it, liking, subscribing, all the good stuff. And if you have any questions or feedback, please leave it in the comments below. And thank you for watching.